here we go.
Welcome to the 9 Route Fantasy Football Podcast.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back in to the 9 Route Fantasy Football Podcast. Pat and Scott, we are back with our Week 3 starts and sits. This is really what it comes down to, trying to figure out maybe some of the better matchups based on week to week, which is what fantasy football is. Maybe fading some of your superstars a little bit because they have a tough matchup, shadow coverage for wide receivers, stuff like that. But at the end of the day, we're going to give you our top fives, one at each position: quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, and defense, and who you should start and who you should sit. Pat, why don't you lead us off?
Start sits. All right. Well, since I technically won week 1, I guess that entitles me to start. It's like golf rules. If you win the hole, you get to tee off first on the next one.
How technically did you win?
Week 1, not week 2.
Oh,
Week
gotcha.
1. Yeah. Week 2 is not technically over yet, but I'll probably win that one too. But we'll see. Again, just before we jump into these, I want to explain real quick. We try to give you guys that you may have questions about whether you should start or sit. We're not obviously picking softballs here and start Lamar Jackson. Like, obviously, if you have Lamar Jackson, you're going to start him. So trying to give you some guys that you can maybe pluck off the waiver wire, or guys who may be on your bench and you have maybe a decision to make, and you want a little, just a little bit of information to help you make that decision. That's what we're trying to do here for you. So with that being said, I'm going to start with Carson Wentz this week as my QB start of the week against Philadelphia. As we said on our last episode, Wentz is third in the NFL after 3 weeks in pass attempts. After 2 weeks. Tied for first in passing touchdowns. Philadelphia has actually been a pretty good defense, but they are actually a bottom 3 red zone defense over the last 20 or so games. And it seems like Washington has been doing, and Carson Wentz in particular, has been doing most of their damage in the red zone. So I think if the Commanders can move the ball, I think that there's a good chance that they can put it in the end zone. We saw so it's funny too, because Philadelphia played Detroit week 1. It was a high scoring game. Washington then played Detroit in week 2, also a high scoring game. So to me, that kind of, 2 and 2 equals 4. I think that this game with Washington and Philadelphia could also be a very high-scoring game. I haven't seen any spreads or anything on that game yet for next week, but I would imagine the spread's probably going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 49, 50 points, somewhere in that neighborhood. So I expect a lot of scoring in that game, and I expect both teams to be doing it. So I think, again, this is one of those shootout games or potential shootout games where you want to get as many of those players into your lineup as possible. So I'm starting Carson Wentz this week versus Philadelphia. At running back, I'm going to go with Josh Jacobs. Jacobs has really, if you're talking about owning the backfield, Jacobs has a stranglehold on the Raiders running back touches so far this year. He's got 31 of the 36 total touches from all running backs on Las Vegas, in their running back room. And he goes up against a Tennessee defense that was the 5th worst versus the running back position in giving up fantasy points last year. I think if the Raiders can get out to a lead against this pretty slow-paced Titans offense, Jacobs could see 20-plus touches for the second straight week. And as we both know, more touches, more opportunities generally leads to more fantasy points. Now, obviously, he would have to be efficient with those touches, but I think when you're doing your start sits and you're thinking about guys who you want to be putting into your lineup, obviously you want to be shooting for the guys who have the most opportunity to put fantasy points on the board. So I really like Josh Jacobs against Tennessee. My wide receiver start is going to be Drake London versus the Seattle Seahawks. London has an unbelievable 33.3% target share in this offense. And I say unbelievable because that's like Devontae Adams on the Packers type of target share. And he's only a rookie, which is that's just unbelievable to me that Marcus Mariota is looking for Drake London basically 1 out of every 3 times he throws the ball. Even with a guy like Kyle Pitts in this offense, London seems to be, Atlanta's go-to guy on offense. And they get to go up against a pretty decent Seattle defense this week. But with safety Jamal Adams out potentially for the season, I think that defensive backfield can be exploited. And I think that, London could have the opportunity to put another touchdown on the board and have a decent game for your fantasy team. At tight end, I'm going to go with Tyler Conklin from the New York Jets going against the Cincinnati Bengals. Conklin quietly has 16 targets through 2 games already this season, and with the Jets leading all teams in pass attempts so far, there's plenty of work to go around. Week 3, the Jets get the Bengals defense that was 5th worst versus the tight end position last year, and the defense that just made Pat Freiermuth the leading receiver for the Steelers in Week 1. So I think that there's definitely an opportunity for, especially with the way that Garrett Wilson has been coming on, I think Cincinnati tries to maybe key on him and take him away, and I think that definitely benefits Tyler Conklin. I could definitely see him getting into the end zone again here in Week 3. And my start of the week at defense is going to be the Kansas City Chiefs versus the Indianapolis Colts. The Colts have looked absolutely terrible so far this season. And the Chiefs have actually had a pretty nice showing against the Chargers' high-powered offense in Week 2. I think Kansas City's defense is better than they get credit for. They were actually a top 10 scoring fantasy defense last year. I know that, a lot of people see the shootouts that the Kansas City Chiefs get themselves into, and, it might deter them a little bit from playing the Kansas City Chiefs defense in their starting lineup. But the Colts have just been turning the ball over left and right. They just can't get right. I think, what do they have a total of? What they score against Houston? Was it 2020? They scored 20 points in Week 1, and they got shut out by the Jags in Week 2. So, a team averaging 10 points a game and averaging 2.5 turnovers per game. Sign me up for playing a defense against a team like that. What about you? Who are your starts for the week, Scott?
Well, again, maybe not the greatest quarterback in the history of the world, but this week, I like Mac Jones going up against the Baltimore Ravens. As of right now, Baltimore, a good football team, and always you just think of the defense, and you're wondering, what do they bring to the table this season? The last couple of years, they were leaking a little bit of oil. Right now, they are basically giving up 420 passing yards a game. That shows me that they're probably looking to, leak again to quarterbacks. Now, again, Mac Jones, not the greatest in the universe, but I think this past week against Pittsburgh, that offense showed some signs of life. Pittsburgh, again, also not a group. Well, they have a decent defense and a decent secondary, but the pass rush with TJ Watt being out is a factor. I like Mac Jones to, he's just outside like the top 20 of quarterbacks in our league. I think after that Week 1 performance, that kind of pushed him into that. A lot of people are high on him. People like the pedigree, the Alabama. To me, I think this week he's got top 15, maybe top 10 potential against that team. Like you talk about shootouts. This could be low scoring at the same time if both defenses maybe get involved. I doubt it. I think it's going to be, it just looks like the league just wants points right now, like no matter what. So I think Mac Jones is a potential starter. Definitely, if you're a super flex league, he would be a solid QB2. At running back, maybe a little bit of a shill, but Leonard Fournette versus Green Bay. Tom Brady does not look himself physically and on the field. At the same time, Mike Evans going to be out, suspended a week. Julio Jones, not really healthy. Shocker. Russell Gage, not 100%. Shocker. That wide receiver core is leaking oil everywhere. Like, that team is rough. I mean, really, when you look at them, that defense is carrying them week to week. It did it a lot last season as well. Once a lot of those guys went down, there is no Gronk. There's Cameron Brate. There is Cade Otton, a rookie. There is Kyle Rudolph, who really can't get involved. At the end of the day, the receiving options are pretty few and far between. Leonard Fournette going up against Green Bay. You might say, oh, yeah, well, come on now. Green Bay is in the bottom half. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. They're like the 8th or 9th worst against the run. Give it 153 yards a game to the run. So Leonard Fournette, I think, is going to be – they're just going to lean on him hard, both the running game and some passing out of the backfield. Next
Can I add to you real quick?
Yeah.
I just saw this tweet earlier today. Leonard Fournette actually on his official Twitter account put out. I'm paraphrasing here because I don't have the tweet right in front of me, but it was something like, to my fantasy managers, I apologize. Touchdowns coming soon, I promise. So even Leonard Fournette realizes what he's doing as far as letting your fantasy team down, and has made it a point to get the ball in the end zone. So would not surprise me to see him pushing for that end zone this week.
Yeah, he's telling you if you're getting it from the player that he's got your back. I mean, come on now. Next up, we are looking at a wide receiver. Never liked the guy a lot because he used to be a Dallas Cowboy, but now he's got some relevance for me. Amari Cooper versus Pittsburgh. Obviously, yes, he's the wide receiver 1 in Cleveland. You have Jacoby Brissett throwing bombs. Quarterbacking anyway, at least on that team. Again, another defense, ironically, out of that AFC North. Pittsburgh is giving up 404 yards in the first 2 games on average to, again, in the passing game. They had been solid. They didn't have a horrible week 1, but they got lit up a little bit in week 2 by Mac Jones, ironically, a little bit. But at the end of the day, to turn around and see that and know that this is going to be one of those gritty division games, and Pittsburgh's definitely going to look to try to shut down the Nick Chubbs, the Kareem Hunts of the world. Donovan Peoples-Jones, I think, went scoreless this past week. Everybody loved him. Cooper had a quiet week 1 against Carolina. That was a weird game on a lot of levels, but Carolina has very good cornerbacks. They have a solid secondary. So they were locked in on him and really wouldn't let him get involved. I think he's got a potential to be probably like somewhere top 8, top 5 possibly this week. If Brissett can have a similar game, with him like he did in week 2. Tight end, Tyler Higbee. The Rams are playing Arizona. And to see Tyler Higbee go up against that team, you say, yeah, he's always that guy who has so much potential and blah, blah, blah. Arizona is giving up an average of, on 12 targets, 9 catches, 110 yards, and a touchdown in their first 2 games at the tight end position. Start every tight end right now, probably for the rest of the season against Arizona. But to see Tyler Higbee in that offense, and again, there's a lot of moving parts. We know Cooper Kupp's there, the running game, the Cam Akers, Darrell Henderson things, going on, so on and so forth, trying to get Allen Robinson involved. But Tyler Higbee could be that guy, across the middle of the field, down the field. He might even not have as many targets and receptions and yardage, but he could be a 2-touchdown guy. Again, there's 12 points. He's going to get you home. I think Tyler Higbee is a solid start against Arizona this week. Finally, for me, I'm looking at wait for it, the Houston Texans. They are playing the Chicago Bears this week, and where Houston is, like you say, maybe why would you even bring them up? They're going up against a Bears team that's getting just about 2 touchdowns a game, on average scoring. Their team offense per game is getting under 300 yards, around 292, 293 a game. Houston Texans have had some pretty good first 2 games. Obviously made the Colts look pedestrian, although that could be something that isn't in their control. And then went up this week against Denver Broncos. Russ wasn't really cooking, just about got things done. And they eked out a win against the Texans, but they didn't look solid. So to see a defense that's, playing, not great, but they're not horrible, but against a bad offense, there's turnover potential. I think that overall, yeah, you could see the Houston Texans probably being a worthy start just based off of numbers and yardage here and there. But I kind of like him against the Chicago Bears.
Yeah, I heard I heard somebody I don't remember who it was, but I heard somebody say something about Russ is cooking, but I think he's using the microwave. So I don't know. I just thought that was funny because they've been crying to let Russ cook, and now we're letting him cook, and I don't know.
Well, when you're you have to adjust for higher altitudes, and now that he's in Denver, I think that's probably part of the problem.
Ball sailing on him a little bit.
A little bit, but I mean, again, Houston giving up a lot of yards, but they're only giving up like 18 points a game, and in the NFL, that's gold. That's like a top 7-8 defense when it comes to points per game. The yards are there, but that bend don't break. We've seen that on our team here in Philly, but at the end of the day, if you have more points than the other team, that's what counts. Yeah,
and speaking of the Bears offense, I was just happened to be looking something up the other night, and I noticed that I don't know the exact number, but I want to say that Justin Fields in 2 games has 28 pass attempts or something like that. Like it's some ridiculously low number in the first 2 games. Now, obviously, week 1 was the monsoon
that kind of jammed him up a little bit.
But he had less pass attempts this week against Green Bay than he did in week 1. So I mean, I think you can start guys against the Bears until they get that figured out. So all right, so let's jump into our sits now for week 3. I'm going to sit Trevor Lawrence this week. I know he looked good in week 2 in that win over the Colts, but the Colts defense isn't nearly what it was last year, and it definitely isn't anywhere near what the Chargers defense is. With superstars on the defensive end, on the defensive side, like Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack, and Derwin James, leading a strong defensive front and backfield now. I think Lawrence could be in for a really long day. The Chargers, even last year, had a really good pass defense. If you remember, it was the run defense that they sort of lacked in, and they've even seemed to get a little bit better in that department as well so far. So it could be a tough day for the Jags. Although they did look good beating the snot out of the Colts in week 2.
Division game too.
Yeah. My sit of the week at running back. You can close your ears for this one. I know you're not going to want to hear it. But it's Dameon Pierce, and then against the Bears. Now, this is not because I don't like Pierce. I actually do like Pierce, definitely not as much as you do. But my rationale behind this sit is Pierce led the Texans backfield in week 2 with 16 total touches, but he still failed to produce a good fantasy day. And against a pretty stingy Bears defense that has been pretty good against the run going back to last year, it's going to be pretty tough for Pierce, I think, to put up a good day. I think this is going to be a fairly low-scoring game. I think with all the rushing attempts that the Bears have, that I just mentioned, the Bears, that's probably where I got the stat from because I looked it up for this. With all of the rushing attempts that the Bears have had, they are one of the lowest teams in plays run each game. So what that does is it actually shortens the game. It takes when you get incomplete passes, you get clock stoppages, things like that. When you run the ball, you're pretty much running just about the full 40 seconds off of the play clock almost every time. So both teams end up getting less plays. So I think this is going to be a slow pace, low scoring game. I do like Pierce as a good hold candidate for now. I'm not going to be, dropping him or trading him or anything like that, but I just don't think, especially in this game, I don't think I would be putting him into my lineup just yet. I do think that down the road, he is going to be a very solid player. And I do think that, he's probably going to, from what I've seen so far, it looks like he's going to have a pretty good career ahead of him. He seems like a very talented guy. Just as far as fantasy goes, I'd stay away from this game specifically. My sit of the week at wide receiver is going to be Allen Lazard versus the Tampa Bay Bucks. Lazard looked to be back and pretty, fully healthy this past week, but the Packers seem to be operating sort of on that Chiefs model so far this year. So, meaning that they're spreading the ball around. You're not seeing any concentration of targets like you did when Davante Adams was on the team. I know a lot of people thought that Lazard was going to step right into that Davante Adams role. That does not seem to be the case so far. Again, it's only been one game, but again, when you're talking fantasy football, you want a guy that you're going to be confident in, and I'm just not that confident in him. This past week, in their win against the Bears, nobody had more than 4 targets, and I realized that they didn't need to throw the ball that much because of the way the game went, and they were ahead and sort of ran the ball, and both of the running backs had pretty good games against the Bears this week. But the Bucs defense has been very good so far this year, and Lazard's probably going to draw shadow coverage from one of the best cover cornerbacks in the league in Carlton Davis. I also expect the Packers, again, to lean on that running game and those running backs in week 3. In week 1, Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon were 1 and 2 as far as targets go. So Rodgers was throwing the ball to those guys. And then again, in week 2, you saw nobody getting a real big target share. So for me, I like Allen Lazard still. Again, just like Pierce, he's a hold option for me. I'm not getting rid of him, but I definitely am a little weary of starting him until I see, that 8, 9, 10 target game that we kind of hoped for and maybe some of us expected going into the season. My sit of the week at tight end, this pains me to say it, and again, you're going to hate this one as well, but it's Dallas Goedert versus Washington. Eagles have not yet played as of this recording, so we don't know Goddard's usage in week 2. But in week 1, he seemed almost to be an afterthought in the Eagles' offense. It seems to be the A.J. Brown show, which, if you have a guy like A.J. Brown, it's not a bad thing to be the A.J. Brown show. But that's not good news for Dallas Goedert. And going up against the Washington defense next week that was in the top half of the league versus the tight end position last year, they didn't really give up a ton of points to the tight end position. Again, I do see this as a high-scoring game. So of all of my sit calls, Goddard is probably the one that I'm the shakiest on and probably the one that's going to come back to bite me. But if I had him on my team, I'd probably start him just due to the fact that I probably drafted him so high. But if you do have Goddard and maybe you used an earlier pick on another tight end or something like that, I definitely would shy away from him this week. And then sticking with that Bucs-Packers game, I'm going to sit the Packers defense this week. They've been a very good defense and have been a good defense for the past 2 seasons. But the Buccaneers are one of those teams like the Chiefs and the Bills that I basically just try to avoid every week if possible, starting a defense against them. Those teams have the potential to score massive amounts of points against any team. And with Tom Brady at the helm, and I know you said he doesn't look like the old Brady, and with Mike Evans out, that offense is probably going to be a little bit weaker than they have been. But these seem to be the games that Brady steps up and makes you realize why he's considered maybe the greatest quarterback of all time. So they also don't turn the ball over a lot, even in games where they're missing some of their best players. They just play good, sound, fundamental football, and they don't turn the ball over at all, which is really, when I'm playing a defense, I'm not trying to play a defense that is going to necessarily shut another team out. What I want is a turnovers. I want the ability to teams that give up a lot of sacks, because you can get fumbles, you can get, safeties, you can get things that are going to score you more points on the defensive side. So even if they end up losing this game to the Packers, I don't see them tripping over themselves and turning the ball over a ton or anything like that. What about you? Where are you at for your sits?
Well, I guess the perfect segue. Well, I like how you set that up. My sit again this week is week 2, and it's Tom Brady, and it's against Green Bay, and it's not hate the wide receiver core being decimated, both with some injuries that are going to make those guys, let alone out, but not 100%. Mike Evans being suspended a game, obviously a big thing. Green Bay, obviously through 2 games, everybody thinks that their defense is Swiss cheese. They got obliterated in week 1. Minnesota beat them, they did, but after 2 games, Green Bay is only giving up an average of 158.5, so call it 159 passing yards a game. Kirk Cousins had looked great, and Justin Jefferson had some big plays, but they lost that game in week 1 more so from an anemic offense than a terrible defense. Giving up 16.5, call it 17 points a game. That's 2 touchdowns. That's pedestrian. I think Fournette is the focal point of the offense this week. I think Brady, for that reason, more so than any kind of decline, the fact of unavailability, based on the wide receiving core, is something to factor in there. So for 2 weeks in a row, and I'm not trying to beat the guy up, but I don't feel like Tom Brady has it this week. Speaking of solid defenses, the last couple seasons, the San Francisco 49ers have been one of the best. After the first 2 weeks of the season, obviously the Bills, they've had a solid one. They're in play tonight. But as of right now, the Niners have the best defense in the league when it comes to total yards per game, when it comes to passing yards per game, when it comes to rushing yards per game. Again, Buffalo hasn't played, so they're a game behind, but it's there. 13 points a game. It's going to be really tough, I think, for both Javonte Williams and Melvin Gordon. If it's a timeshare, if it's a 60-40, 50-50, 70-30, I don't care. This team knows Russell Wilson, so they're definitely going to know what to take away from him. If Jerry Jeudy's a little banged up, you're looking for your Cortland Suttons. You're looking for your random tight ends, because we know Akwegbunam doesn't get too much love there. But I feel like both Javonte Williams and Melvin Gordon, that running back combo with the Niners, I think that's what they're going to do, is they're going to try to play them into thinking they should run the ball. They're going to take a lot away from Russ. I see the Niners really dominating this game as a whole. Offensively, if they do it with Jimmy G, that's one thing. But I would stay away from Javonte Williams and or Melvin Gordon this week in my running back spot. My next is a fade. It's not a dead sit. I do this a little bit here and there, and I've been a little close, I've been a little far away. But CeeDee Lamb against the New York Giants. God, I hate to have to talk about two of these teams at the same time. I just really do. I
skip this one. It's
it just says go with it. No, but seriously, the Giants aren't so far a horrible football team. I'm not going to say any words that begin with G, but they're not a horrible football team. New coaching staff, new regime, and whatnot. They're like in the top 12 against the pass right now. Obviously scheming to build against what the Eagles were building. They may have a shot against Washington. Deep down, yes, they're looking to scheme against Dallas. Now, when they had CeeDee Lamb, they had Michael Gallup, they had your Amari Coopers until this season, Dalton Schultz at tight end. The Giants' passing defense is decent. Their team as a whole is decent. I think CeeDee Lamb being a focal point, there's whispers that Michael Gallup might be back, might be available. And Cooper Rush is just a roll of the dice. He's a wild card. You don't really know yet because you haven't seen him enough. I think CeeDee Lamb is not worthy of a wide receiver 1, probably wide receiver 2, closer to a flex. I would not expect big things out of him. I think they're probably going to look to maybe lean on Zeke and Pollard a little bit, switch things up a tiny bit. But I would say CeeDee Lamb, a little bit of a fade in week 3. Gerald Everett, tight end, Los Angeles Chargers, had a nice first couple weeks, had a big Thursday night game and, helped Justin Herbert a lot. I think the big thing for me going against Jacksonville looks pretty good. And again, in their passing defense, their linebacking core, being able to chuck tight ends and keep them in transit. I think part of that is pass protection. If it's Justin Herbert with a flak jacket looking for protection, the tight end's going to stay in and block. Guess what? It's going to be Everett. He's not going to leave the line. He's going to be a 6th to 7th blocker to take care of a pass rush. I think that's a big factor. If it's Chase Daniel, the backup, the guy who we all wish we were, who has made a cool living off of being that guy, again, you're going to look to protect that quarterback. And I think that's going to be a big factor for him, where he's had a couple nice games so far. And I know, Pat, you just touched on, Dallas Goedert being a little disappointing in week 1. And I think that's part of it. People forget that the tight end position used to be basically an extra lineman that was legally allowed to go out and block or go out and catch after blocking. I think that's part of it. I think that he's going to be a little bit more of that as this season progresses. Now, maybe they may switch some things up with fullbacks. Xander Horvath, who's quietly catching touchdowns every game, could be in that factor too. But I think effort, you might downgrade that Jacksonville defense. Looks a little hungry. They remind me of that 2017, 2018 defense a little bit. And if they're on that level, maybe that team, they got nothing to lose. They're young. We'll see what happens. Finally, the Minnesota Vikings, I would definitely sit them this week. It's going to be a short week regardless. Obviously, they have a game coming up in about an hour against our Philadelphia Eagles. They're going up against the vaunted, I just can't even say it out loud, the Detroit Lions offense that has been averaging, 36 points a game, 406 yards through the air, things like that. Like they're just like, or 406 yards combined, I'm sorry. But they're ridiculous with what they're doing. Because again, they're just running through walls for that coach and doing what they got to do. This is a division game. The Vikings are, high off of beating Aaron Rodgers. They looked pretty good. We'll see what happens this week against Philly. But again, they're a team that is willing to shoot it out with you left and right. And I think that this Vikings team is definitely going to hit a wall sooner than later. They might have to lean on the run. They might have to lean on the pass. But I could see that overall, the Detroit Lions, the way that they play, they are just balls to the wall. They are going to just throw it, run it, do whatever. DeAndre Swift, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Hawkinson's been a little bit quiet, but I think that's, again, he's just staying in there to protect Jared Goff, who may be a mannequin, but you know what? He's starting to put up numbers. We'll see what happens, but I would definitely fade, let alone wouldn't even think of starting the Vikings this week against that Detroit offense.
I actually did sit CeeDee Lamb in one of my leagues this week. Now, I have to preface that by saying it was an 8-team league, so all of the rosters are fairly stacked, and I had good players that that I could replace him with. But yeah, the loss of Dak definitely brings him down a notch as well. So.
Yeah, and you're saying it. It's true. It's not fading a guy who was projected to be a potential top 5 wide receiver. He lost his quarterback, and you have another wide receiver coming back to the fold. At the same time, I think one of the biggest things is just matchups and what you have on your roster. It is a week-to-week game. It's so hard. I've done it, Pat. You've done it. How many times where you've got your guy and you're like, well, he was my 3rd-round pick, but the guy I picked in round 8 is projected to be that better, but I just can't pull the trigger. I just can't do it. And you sit, and then it turns out you were right if you had actually made the call, but you didn't. And again, I'm not saying bench him, but he's going to go from a wide receiver 1 to a high flex, a mid border bottom to wide receiver 2. So I don't see CeeDee Lamb again being, don't cut him. I'm not saying that, but if you have some depth at that wide receiver core on your team, again, if it's him and Amon-Ra St. Brown, who do you pick?
Yeah, it's St. Brown, and I didn't think there would be any chance I'd be saying that this early in the season, but it's true. I mean, CeeDee Lamb's not even the top fantasy producing wide receiver on his own team so far this year.
Yep.
Noah Brown has more receptions, more yards, and more touchdowns on fewer targets. So, and he seems to have a pretty good rapport with Cooper Rush. So
backups love backups.
Yeah. Well, that they practice together, so they know each other well. So, all right. Well, that's going to do it for our start sits for this week. Again, if you'd like to follow us on social media, please do so. We are on Twitter at the 9route1 and at Scott from Delco. You can check out our website at www.the9routeffb.com. You can also email us or email the show at the9routeffb@gmail.com. We'd also like to take a second to thank Mickey's Pub in Tuckerton, New Jersey for partnering with the show. If you're looking for a great place to watch the NFL on Sunday and you're in, South Jersey, Mickey's is the place. They have great food.
South Central Jersey, right? Like,
yeah, in the Tuckerton, Little Egg Harbor area, LBI-ish area.
If you're in AC or you're at the casinos, take a ride, get an Uber. You're not far, like 15, 20 minutes. Mickey's is a spot, man. They got the package. You could go there, watch any team you want while you're betting on them. Do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Great drink specials as well. And they have a football menu with all their great their Sunday specials that go on during the game. So go ahead and check that out. Let them know that we sent you here at the 9 Route, Mickey's Pub, 327 East Main Street in Tuckerton. Again, thanks to Mickey's for being a part of the show. Anything else that we need to hit before we get out of here and watch some football?
I think I am taking over the editing duties for tonight, so you can watch while you study. Again, love you, brother. Appreciate doing this with you. We love everybody that listens to us here at the 9 Route. Again, we're just we're trying to give you some info, give you our take on things, maybe sway in a positive direction, maybe clear the thoughts a little bit. Again, we're not as much as we maybe root for a certain team in real football, so to speak. At the end of the day, we are all about trying to give you the information you need on a week-to-week basis to get you a fantasy football championship. We helped one gentleman last year, and we're going to look to do that for multiple gentlemen and ladies this season. So give us a listen, like, subscribe, hit us up on socials. We are looking forward to interacting with you and giving you what you need to win your fantasy football league here at the 9 Route. So for Pat, I am Scott, and we will see you next week. Peace.